Yeah, it does. It does keep it.
Everything's piled up in the same place.
Yeah, there is that advantage.
Welcome, everybody, to the May 8th, 2024 regular meeting of the Conservation Commission. Our chair, Samantha, could not be here today, so I'm going to chair in replacing that. And so I'm thinking, Brian, do you want to vote? I think because we're short one. And then Stuart has to leave at like 5:15. If we're still going, then Talia, you would also be voting. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the April 10th, 2024 minutes. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the Conservation Commission meeting on April 10th, 2024.
Thank you. And second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Adam, second. Any discussion or any comments on the minutes? No? So I guess it was perfect. It's great.
It looked pretty good to me.
Okay, all those in favor? And anybody opposed? No? And sustained?
I wasn't here.
Oh, okay, so one sustained. Okay, great, thank you. So the first item under wetland conditional use permit applications, new business is 50 Andrew Jarvis Drive. We don't have anybody here to speak to that yet?
Doesn't look like it. We might have to
Okay.
take it out of order.
Take it out of order. Does anybody want to make a motion to take 50 Andrew Jarvis Drive until there's somebody, out of order until there's somebody here to speak to it?
I would
Go ahead.
make a motion to postpone that until there's somebody here to speak to it.
And second that?
Second.
Second from Alice. Thank you. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, thanks. So we are moving on to 89 Cliff Road. Welcome. Please introduce yourself at the podium and we'll get started.
Richard Kinney. So you can see the site plan here, the back part of the lot. We had about a 4,900 square feet in the buffer. And we have a disturbance of that buffer by about 225 square feet, composed of that corner of the three-season porch, about half of the adjoining outdoor porch, and the concrete pad there for the staircase coming off of that porch.
If you don't mind, Richard, I'll just jump in. I realized I didn't send this out to commissioners today or print copies. I forgot about that, so I apologize. But Richard uploaded an updated site plan, which is what you're seeing on the screen this morning. So that's showcasing plantings in the rain garden and some changes, I think, based off of the site walk we had last week. Oh, and he came prepared.
Way too small for me.
Yeah, I apologize. It's tough to see.
Blank. I'm gonna reference hard copy that I brought. I have additional hard copies if that'll make it easier for anybody.
Does anybody want hard copies or you want to?
I'll take one if you have it. The file's actually not opening well for some reason.
I don't think we don't have it.
Weird.
Well, yeah, even though
Is it frozen?
it's like 280. Oops. Thank you. And I can share.
You could share them along the...
Yeah, we maybe
Do you want to share
one
one
more
this side?
for over there too, or?
We'll take
We'll,
one.
we'll just take one collectively.
The requisite size that they asked for, so.
So if you need to be at the table, is that what you're saying?
Like, it would be easier.
So can you bring the mic over? Because there isn't, I don't think there's a
Could be the
mic.
hand mic.
Or can you use one at the table?
Yeah, if you want to take, if that's removable, it might just be easy to hear you through that while you're looking at it from the table, if that's okay.
Try not to create.
Or you can just use one that's already on the table
No, no,
too.
no, no.
Perfect.
There you go.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
And I should probably sit though.
Sure.
Okay, how's that?
Good, thank you.
All right, so again, referencing the 4,875 square feet of wetland buffer on the lot. The disturbance consisting of 225 square feet, consisting of that corner of the three-season porch, about half of that adjoining deck, and the concrete pad. In discussions principally with Kate, and then the feedback that you all provided during the site visit a week ago, we had, there was a suggestion or recommendation for a French drain and the rain garden, and in addition, replanting the back, replacing the existing grass with micro clover, all in an effort to mitigate those disturbances on the wetland buffer. You can see there's a lot of detail on this plan. Another question that was raised was concerning the downspouts and how those were draining. You'll see a note here that to the north, to the top of the drawing, there will be a downspout there. That all drains to the north side of the driveway, where there's quite a bit of stone and ground cover that's developed there on the north side of the driveway, so that all stays there. In our experience, it's never even gone on to the driveway itself from that downspout. If you go to the southern tip of the top there of the gray area, that's the garage. There's another downspout there. We're going to be directing that to the stone that's beneath the three-season porch. If you move on an angle to the corner of the three-season porch, there's another downspout that's marked that will also drain under the three-season porch. And you can reference the note that the stone, not only are the porches, the deck surrounded by 24 inches of stone, there's gravel completely underneath both the three-season porch and the adjoining deck, and that totals 858 square feet of stone and gravel, both in front of those porches and beneath those porches. So I think quite a bit of filtration there for water that can occur. You can then go to the, if you'd like, to the plantings. There's a little marking there for the French drain. It was brought up last Wednesday, some concern about considering a French drain in that location because of the minimal grade on this lot and the entire lot being below grade on the roadway. So we're going to have that looked into more closely by Josh Staubel of Sea Change Land Services. Josh is, he may have tried to, or may have communicated with you today, Kate. I think he indicated he had a call in anyway.
Okay.
And he has a background, having taken some, I won't get the exact term, but erosion control certifications in Maine. Seems to have an extensive background in this. Just over the phone, he was able to raise a number of issues. And he'll be visiting the site here just as quick as we can to see if a French drain is really practical. Again, there was some skepticism expressed in that regard on Wednesday. And then, depending on what that determination is, you'll note that I state that if a French drain is deemed impractical, then we will add a gutter to the front of this porch and drain that to the gravel beneath the open deck. So you can see that note there by the French drain. And then finally, I decided to highlight the drainage area that the rain garden would be accommodating. You can see that highlighted with the little wavy green lines. And as requested, provided not only highlights of the various plants, but I can give that in more detail if anybody would like. the listed characteristics of the plants and how many of each, if anybody would like. And then finally, in front of the porch, there will be 4 plants, and you can see it called out there, the Viburnum acerifolium. And then also requested to have a cross-section of the rain garden and a cross-section of the French drain. Some provided here to the right. And I also should note that the websites that were provided, various linkages that Kate provided as determining various guidance on rain gardens and such. If you look at that, you can extrapolate how you can size that rain garden. We have, they indicate, one of the guidelines is 6-inch deep loamy soil. And I have a photo if anybody would like to see it, where it's a great deal deeper than that on the property. We have access to that simply because of the new system that went in linking up to the city sewer on Walker Bungalow. And they went down quite a ways, so it gives a very nice cross-section of the nature of the soil. So as I said, it's a great deal deeper than 6 feet. But if you just look at the 1,000-foot indication for drainage area that they provide on this guidance that the city provided, it works out to 0.16 square feet of rain garden per square foot of drainage area. And we are within that on this 134 square feet of the rain garden. So decided to do that calculation just to be on the safe side. Any questions?
Any questions from the commissioners?
I have one. Just curious about that calculation. Did you do that on only the new parts that were draining to your yard, or every impervious surface on the property?
It's including the concrete pad, which is the
But does
only.
it include the existing home, I guess, is what I'm asking, like all
Oh, no,
the, okay.
no.
So it's just
No.
that
And
area
the-
that's shaded, okay.
Yeah, the shaded area, if you wouldn't be expected to remember this from the lot, but where we chose the rain garden and where we focused is where there's just a slight depression.
Okay.
And it really is slight. There's just a slight depression in this area. Everything, if you look at the area highlighted by those little wavy green lines, everything to what would be the west or to your left, that's almost all on a slope. And you remember coming down that slope, that all goes toward the neighbors. It finally levels off a little bit there. It's not very wide that there's that little depression. Then there's a little rise to the south, and then again it drains toward the neighbors. And then, of course, we have the stone, etc. The northern boundary, if you go to your right, again, there's a little bit of a rise on the property there. You might remember a magnolia tree is right in there. And then if you continue right to the edge of what's marked on the rain garden, there's another rise there. So it's just one little somewhat lower lying area right here. The rest of the yard does not collect any water at all. It's just sort of irregular and relatively flat.
So just to follow up on that question, so you actually sized it for the yard area, but not the roof area,
No, not the roof area because of the gutters.
and not the deck?
Not the, well, no, because of the stone beneath.
Yeah.
So I thought that would provide pretty effective drainage, all the stone and gravel beneath the deck, and it's all gapped, of course. So we were focusing more on where water actually accumulates, where we've seen it accumulate in the past, however modestly, and of course the concrete pad.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? So I have a couple of questions. So when you talk about the French drain, well, actually, the drip line trench, how deep is that?
Where the stone is,
Yeah, so, yeah, you mentioned, you kind of mentioned where the stone is
Yeah.
along the outside, and
you can
is
see it a
that,
bit highlighted there. It's probably 2 to 3 inches.
2 to 3 inches just going around the
Exactly,
house?
exactly.
2 to 3 inches deep?
Mhm.
Nothing underneath the stone, it's just regular soil?
Soil, exactly.
Okay. So to be a drip line trench, you would need to dig a trench and fill it with stone, usually about 12 inches deep. You could follow the recommendations in the guidance, but, it's going to be 12 inches, is it 12 inches wide too around?
24 inches.
24 inches wide, okay. So yeah, you would need to have something underneath, so it's not just going through a couple of inches of stone. You need
Now,
some
is
storage.
that even if the French drain or the gutter is there?
Well, the gutter, then you would want to make sure that the sizing from what's coming off the gutter, that whatever you do to handle that is able to handle it. And it's possible that maybe it's okay over by the side where you mentioned that there's a lot of stone already and there's some plantings and things like that. It's just, we don't really know. But, yeah, and it can still be an infiltration trench around and not have the pipe inside to drain it more too. So you have that option also, but, so.
So you're recommending,
At this point, I don't know if we would recommend, because if you are going to have somebody in there that's going to make recommendations for you, that's really helpful.
okay.
But those are kind of the things we're thinking of. I don't know. There's, yeah. And my other question is, when would this person be coming to help make recommendations? Before the planning board meeting?
The individual Josh,
Yeah,
hopefully within a week.
okay.
And that's why I made the note that if he determines that a French drain really doesn't make sense here, then we'll go with the gutter.
Yeah, okay. Other questions from? Yes.
Thinking about the French drain, the goal is just to capture water that's coming off the roof? Is that the goal, or are you also trying to dry out the yard?
Well, it's really was intended just for the roof, the three-season porch roof. And the difficulty that was brought up on Wednesday is that there's so little pitch on the yard. The grade is so, well, again, just a minimal pitch on the yard, that there's really no place to send the water that it would collect in the French drain. And again, we'll still get a professional opinion on that, but it's trying to address that concern. You might recall I had asked Peter if, for some guidance in that regard, because typically, as given my minimal understanding of French drains, but my understanding was it should be directed somewhere when there's heavier flow. And he felt that, well, he commented that it didn't appear to be anything available for that on the lot. And again, made even more complicated where the entire lot is below grade on versus Walker Bungalow.
Right. So you don't think you could get the French drain closer to the rain garden, like so that it could discharge into the rain garden?
Well, and I asked him
Yeah.
that question
Yeah.
specifically, and he said, well, you'll end up, to get the proper grade, you'll have to come underneath the rain garden. And he didn't see how that's really going to properly work, I guess. That coming underneath it and where it would really go. So, again, getting another opinion on that.
Yeah. And the other approach you could use there that might actually be cheaper and simpler is more of just a vegetated swale kind of thing, like just a little depression that kind of took the water from the edge of your house all the way to the rain garden, just on the surface. So it's not like you have to go down and then have it come back up to the rain garden, you know?
That would certainly be simpler because there's
Yeah.
little, again, given how the nature of the grade, there would be little that would have to be done there.
Yeah. It's nice to see the plants, though. Thank you for going through all the detail of identifying plants and locations and laying it out.
You are welcome.
Yeah, and along with the plants, you mentioned that you have that list, and then you were going to say how many and where. Could you just supply that with the application, too?
So I have this,
Okay.
which is pulling out from the actual PDF that was provided, pulling out the individual plants and all the details, and then the quantity right above for each one of those. So you want me to upload this to the,
To the application for when that you submit to the, and I don't know if everybody wants to know how many here?
Well, pass it around maybe?
Yeah.
Correlate,
Yeah.
correlate.
If you, do you want to read them out real quick, or however the best way to do that is?
I am not going to read the scientific names.
No, no, you don't have to.
That would be a little
It would be easier if you didn't.
potentially a bit embarrassing. So we have 7 of the marsh marigold, 5 of the white turtlehead, 3 of the closed gentian, 6 spotted cranesbill geraniums, 4 of the cardinal flower, 1 sweet Joe pieweed, 4 foxglove beard tongue, 2 swamp verbena, 1 eastern ninebark, 1, still have to do this one, Rhodosier, dogwood.
Thank you.
The location and the count and the size is all correlated on there too.
Yeah, on the diagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's helpful, both of those, thank you.
Well,
And I have one question about the clover and the lawn. Were you planning on tearing up that lawn, or were you doing it to just, are you going to overseed, or?
it was, Josh's, I mentioned Josh Staubel a moment ago. His wife, Robin, worked with us on the rain garden. She's a landscape designer. And Robin, when she visited the site, indicated that what she said they would do is just spray, or I don't even know what the right term is, but the micro clover would be on top of the grass and apparently eventually replace it, which I think would be much less disruptive.
So did Robin already go out there to the property? Did Robin?
It was kind of amazing because we didn't have a whole lot of time. So yeah, she was able to get it out.
That's helpful.
And
Thank you.
spent a bit of time this weekend on this.
Okay. Thanks. Other questions, comments?
I just have a maybe clarification comment about the rain garden. So in the cross section, it looks like it's 6 inches deep at its most with the peat mix. But I thought you mentioned maybe even deeper when you and Josh sort of talked about the rain garden. So what would the actual depth be for digging that area and filling it in with different soil mixes?
Our understanding from the guidelines was 6 inches, but it's if you recommend something deeper or feel that would be more appropriate. It's not a particular item that I talked about with Robin, so maybe if we're off on that one, we will remedy that.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you typically find works better?
Well, I know Barbara and I and Peter and I have had conversations about rain gardens, and in this particular area, it might not technically qualify in that spot as a rain garden just because the water's sort of already ponding there. So it might be, and it's a good spot anyway to put planting because that'll help absorb the water from the ground. So maybe just maybe language change in the plans to more of just a planting area, because I don't know, rain garden, it seems like that's a place to redirect water to, whereas the water's already going there. Is that sort of how?
Sort of, yeah, and you don't, usually you would do a perk test to see how much things are infiltrating there, and you would describe that a lot of the water on the property ponds there when it rains.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, again, the site actually drains really well, more that if it's wetter, it's wetter there. Again, just because of the slight depression. But there's no pooling or pond to speak of that forms.
Okay, so it's pretty good, it's not clay, and it's probably
No.
pretty silty.
I can take a moment and show you the, this is a photo that Severino provided when we did the kitchen. You can see they've already filled with dirt here, but you can see on these sides just how far down the loamy soil is.
Oh, that's great.
I have a couple of these.
Thank you.
I think quite fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we should make recommendations or you should wait to see what, what Josh says too. But normally you would do a perk test, know how fast it infiltrates, and then decide on what to put underneath, you know, if it should be a little deeper and things like that. You want to have enough area so that the water can collect and infiltrate underneath, which it might naturally do a lot with what you say is six inches, right? So it's hard. I would recommend a little bit deeper than that, you know, and putting some substrate underneath for it, but.
That's fine. I don't think that really creates much trouble at all.
Yeah, I think I might have been confused by the language too, just because it's called a rain garden, so I kind of expected that maybe the plan would be directing water to it, because that's typically what you would see. So I think as you figure out the way that the roofs are draining, and if it doesn't work to French drain, and maybe you're, you know, creating depressions that lead to it, I think then it makes more sense to sort of shift the drainage area around those things that are directing water to it if it is going to remain a rain garden. I think that was the nature of my first question, like how did you make the calculation? Because I think what I would have expected is, you know, part of the roof area drains to this gutter, and that gutter's directing in one direction, and then another part of the roof is draining to another gutter, which is being handled by the gravel and the rain garden, for instance, like that kind of thing, rather than a portion of the lawn being drained into the rain garden, if you see what I mean. I think I was a little confused about how the rain garden was getting its water, what the intention was there. So I think typically you see some depressions or something to direct water towards them.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense, but it seems that it's somewhat contingent on how the areas underneath the porch and the deck, which, as I indicated, is a pretty good size area,
Right.
how that handles the water from the
Right.
gutters.
Yeah, it's a complicated thing.
And I don't know how we would, we've gone through a season
Right.
now,
Yeah.
because the three-season porch and the deck have been in since September of last year. So we've gone through, well, a fair amount of rain.
Yeah.
And and there hasn't been, and there were still gutters on the home was re-sided in January.
Yep.
So there were still the gutters in the same locations that I'm indicating here. There were gutters up until the middle of January. And I did not notice any, well, there was still no pooling that took place. So the stone and gravel beneath the three-season porch and the stone and gravel beneath the deck did handle what we had from October through January.
Yeah, I think I was just trying to follow up on why I might have seemed confused about the drainage area, because typically I think what I would have thought a rain garden would be doing is sort of directing
Yeah.
water from elsewhere on the property towards it. So.
I'm thinking I don't understand rain gardens, is what I'm thinking. It was my understanding that, given that this is the wetter area,
Right.
that it would be nice to just try to soak up more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the extent of my understanding.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if we're dealing with semantics or we need, well, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'll just say, I apologize, because I probably misled you in that on our first sidewalk too, because that was my understanding, really, is that where water goes, that's a great place to get some plantings and some rain garden collection areas, but maybe this is just a good place to, what you're already doing is putting plantings in and not necessarily go as deep as you might need to for a rain garden. So I think it's still the right direction to put a lot of plants in that area, and it'll definitely help.
So, yeah, I mean, is this a semantic question, or do we think that these plantings are appropriate to absorb the amount of rainwater fall-off that will come from the drains?
I mean, the site is already absorbing that water fairly well. It's just a responsible thing
Yeah,
to do
so-
to add the plantings, I think.
No, I'm not saying
Yeah.
don't do them. I'm saying, like,
Right.
do we agree with this? Is this adequate, or is it not adequate and it's not just semantics? So if we can change the wording, then is that okay? Because, and encourage the plantings anyway, of course.
Agreed.
Yeah, there's two things in this equation. Is one, it's after the fact, so we don't really know existing conditions, and when you say there's gravel underneath these areas, I don't know what's underneath the gravel. Is it, just soil? Is it 3 inches of gravel and then soil? So it's not like it was constructed intentionally to infiltrate everything there, but it seems to be doing okay, I guess, from what
Well,
you say.
Actually, that's not quite accurate. It was intended to
Okay,
infiltrate the water.
so that's stone.
Not saying that there was a perk test done, but it was all just dirt beneath it before, and we put that gravel and the stone on top of the dirt.
On top of the dirt, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, normally there'd be more gravel, a depth to the gravel underneath, and the soil would be excavated out so that you'd have the gravel, sand and gravel underneath, but that doesn't seem like maybe it was necessary to do here, I don't know. But, and so there's that, and then you're having somebody come, I think Josh is probably an engineer, or at least has some expertise in it,
He
and
has
he's gonna
some
make recommendations.
certification on erosion control in the state of Maine,
Right.
so I think he's quite knowledgeable. But I want to emphasize that's more just trying to determine how we handle this water from the roof of the three-season porch. I think his wife would probably be perhaps more useful as far as Robin more useful as far as what we'll call the planting area,
Right.
not use the other term, if you would prefer. I can't tell you how long it took for me to remember that was the right reference, but I kept calling it a water garden for the longest time. So,
Yeah. So, and as Alice says, if you're doing a rain garden normally, you would calculate it based on the impervious area, not the lawn area, but the rooftops and driveways and walkways and things like that. And since there might not need to be additional, catchment for drainage off of those impervious areas, then maybe, I don't know. Are we
I'm
okay?
not going to use that term. It perhaps is a good time also to mention that there has never been water, and I confirmed this, I indicated this last Wednesday and confirmed it with the neighbor a couple of days ago. Water has never gone over the road toward the pond, either from his property or our property, and he's been there for over 20 years.
And there's no culvert that goes under the road.
No. It actually, and you can see this really quite visually, it would really appear that everything to the west side of Walker Bungalow is actually going south. And as I said, visually, you can kind of see that. There's just a gentle slope going down. And that is perhaps why the water's never gone over the road.
So it's going to Sagamore Creek,
Right.
actually. Yeah. Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve this with some change in the language, like not using the term rain garden, finding a more appropriate term. Maybe somebody can suggest a more appropriate term than rain garden, since we're suggesting, since this wasn't purpose-built to absorb rain that was directed to that point.
Planting area, maybe?
Yeah.
Depressed.
Kate, did you suggest a proper term?
Like planting area, it doesn't have to be too proper, just,
Okay, can handle that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it might work.
Just make sure it's not elevated, you know, you don't bring in any soil in, you're actually making it concave and
Oh, right,
depressed.
right.
Any other stipulations? Anybody want a second?
I might just either add to that or add a stipulation that, I mean, I don't know how others feel, but that area seems completely fine. I wouldn't go less than that, but once you have the experts in, you might want to shift it slightly or make it larger or smaller. And I mean,
You're
I think
saying the planting area?
yeah, right, the planting area.
Sure.
You know, it might serve you better to move it or something, and I don't have any issue with it being,
You raise a question that I had, that you just reminded me. In the guidelines for the other item that shall not be named, they said it had to be 10 feet away from a foundation. We're obviously well away from that, but still, just to err on the side of caution, made it 10 feet away from the pad, the concrete pad. Recognize that's not the foundation, but nonetheless. So am I to understand that that stricture for a planting area may not apply? And we have a little more flexibility here with shifting that. Okay.
Plus, that recommendation for being away from the foundation is so that you don't end up with water in your basement, and that doesn't seem relevant here either.
No, and now I understand a little bit better why that would be there, given the nature of the other thing.
yeah, so I guess just in the motion, you might just say the area and the number of plants presented, but then it doesn't have to necessarily hold fast to that exact spot. I don't know, just offering it a little more detail.
We have a motion and it's seconded with 2 stipulations. I'm making a recommendation for another stipulation.
But maybe that there should be some, once Josh or your expert is out about the French drain, to maybe follow up with Kate and Peter, if that's okay, so that there's just clarification about what the plan and intention is before you actually go before the planning board, so they have a clear picture.
We'll update this,
Okay.
absolutely.
And then the other stipulation idea I had was about boundary markers. And we want to, just like a little reminder that this is, the protected wetland buffer area that you're in. We typically ask applicants to install just like their little decals, little metal kind of plates to indicate that it's it's a protected area.
You're asking to indicate, mark the wetland buffer, you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, and it could be really, I mean, it could be right around this planting bed, just as a reminder that it is kind of protected buffer space. Does that make sense to other people?
I think, yeah, I was trying to think of ways to include our wetland boundary markers as well when I was looking over this. And at first I was thinking, oh, right along the pond would be great, but the pond isn't your property, it's across the street. But we have markers that say, you know, protected cut area, limited or environmentally sensitive area, to sort of indicate that it's a sensitive area and you shouldn't really be trampling through it or using chemicals, things like that. But they're just 4-inch little markers. And like Lynn said, the planting area might be a good spot to put one. Or I was also thinking that corner of your lot where the tree, there's like a couple trees in the very corner across the street from the pond. Maybe you could put one there. Just it's good for property owners to know that they're in a buffer area, but also people walking by or doing landscaping work in the area.
And is this something that you have, that
Yep.
the city has?
Yep, we sell them in the Planning and Sustainability Department upstairs. They're little small metal markers and they're $5 a piece. Usually 1 or 2 would be good for your property. We usually recommend every 50 feet along the buffer, so I think
Okay.
your property just sort of has that corner, so maybe 1 or 2 on display would be good for that area.
Okay, sure.
So we have 4 stipulations for the motion on the table. Does anybody need to hear them again or anything like that? No?
No.
Anybody want to add anything?
No.
Okay, so no other discussion? All those in, oh,
Did we get a
wait a minute.
second?
What?
Did we get a second?
I don't think you had a second.
Oh, I assumed that somebody,
Yeah, I don't think we had
somebody that
one,
did one as
but
well.
I'll second it.
Okay, sounds good. And Stuart, you're okay with all the
Yep,
conditions?
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess I don't have, for discussion, I don't have anything to add other than this is a hard one because, well, it's after the fact for one thing, and then there's a lot of uncertainty here. But I like the condition of having them check in with Peter and Kate after you meet with Josh, so that would be great. And keep in mind, we want to do the infiltration around, if there is a trench, it's going to be a lot deeper. That's our goal, and Josh would probably recommend that, but, so. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Thank you. And will you send me those stipulations? Will I have access to
Yep.
those?
You'll get a letter of decision out in the mail, but I can also follow up with an email, and we can work together before you submit to planning board next month to get in. So you get your wetland conditional use permit recommendation from the Conservation Commission, and then you'll be placed on the planning board agenda for the following month, so in June, and they'll have the final decision on approval, denial, postponement. So we'll get together to talk about that. Tomorrow or Friday? But soon, definitely soon.
Great.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you for following up carefully on all of the items that we mentioned on the site walk. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Try to be thorough. Are there any other materials that need to be returned to me?
Now, you want to keep that just in case?
Appreciate your time, appreciate the attention.
Yeah, thank you.
Site
you.
walk was impressive. Thank you. This would not be possible without that feedback.
Enjoy.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So the next item on our agenda is 146 Pleasant Street.
346.
Oh, sorry. Where is the 146? 346. Somebody's here to speak to that? He's still not here, right?
No, so we might be postponing PHS later.
Hello, you guys. It's been about a week. But, so this is revisiting the fence replacement, existing, no more disturbance than the posts that are existing for the perimeter fence on our outside garden.
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm so sorry.
No, that's
I'm
okay.
Madison with Wentworth Senior Living. Property manager is my title. So our project scope of work is to replace our fence on our outdoor garden. That is both the exterior and interior fence. Our interior fence is for our memory care unit that leads directly out. That's completely secured with fob systems, and the entire area is under surveillance too. We had discussed, so the proposed change is a material change that keeps the aesthetic. After our site walk last week, I did investigate aluminum options for a metal fence because that's another paintless material. The color options were silver, bronze, and black, so that would really change the aesthetic of what we're doing. The closest aesthetic we could find was in that picture above that you just scrolled past. That's a sample install of the vinyl material, and I know the conservation is less concerned with aesthetics than they are impact to the ground. But really no change, no excavation. I think we talked about the installation process, complete no dig, all manual labor. I know that economic considerations aren't really important, but it is an extra cost incurrence for those additional labor charges. We had spoken a little bit. Lynn, I believe you gave me the resource to NHDES. I did check out their website, so I found some native plantings if that winds up being a stipulation. So I do have that resource. Didn't include that unless it is required. We're more focused on controlling the invasive ivy right now. So with that, we did start pulling some of that off the fence yesterday. We had a good group of volunteers, and the fence is not in repairable condition anymore. That was part of what was holding it together. So as we pulled that off of some of the trees, so we're trying to save the trees that are there and really control that ivy. But so that's what we have right now. I don't know if there's any more questions from you guys, if you need any more clarification from me.
Thank you. Any questions?
Well, it sounds like, I apologize, I wasn't able to make the site walk. But one of my concerns looking at this project, and it sounds like it was discussed a bit at the site walk, is a vinyl plastic fence being that close to the watershed. And, you know, directly for you, it does seem like there will be some maintenance involved in this, as the warranty says it doesn't cover mildew or mold or those kinds of things. So you're going to have to maintain it to make sure that doesn't happen, to maintain your warranty. And I've never been involved in an installation of a vinyl fence, but my understanding is it can be more expensive. Like if something does happen to it, it's harder to just replace portions and sections. So have you kind of worked through all of those factors of going with this material as your product of choice as
Yeah,
well?
so with the vinyl fence, it comes so you'd assemble in sections. The posts would be installed, and then the slats slide into holes that are prefabbed into the posts. So we would be able to replace just one post in one section. Part of the installation process is the vinyl posts are hollow, and they would be sleeved over 2-inch steel posts. So that way, it would provide some rigidity without setting it in a concrete footing. So there would be no below-grade aggregate added. And that was kind of the important factor and consideration.
I also worry about just being so close to this waterway and this watershed. You know, there is going to be degradation of that material that's going to flow directly into that waterway over time. So that is also a concern for me personally.
Okay. And I did look for information on leaching too, as well as, you know, even minimal submersion, any submersion that it could possibly see. I don't think that we've ever had an occurrence where it's come over that lip. I asked our neighbor, he's only been there 2 years at the end on Wentworth Street, so he couldn't provide any insight into that. We haven't seen it. I know we have perimeter sump basins, and those function. If they didn't function, possibly, but again, that would more come up in our first floor because that's below, even lower than our fences, as it's below grade. I didn't find any like leaching information or any properties like that. I would be as concerned too with paint chips going airborne. I know that latex paint has no VOCs at this point, but still, those are going airborne or ending up. I think that if we dropped a quart of paint or anything in the water, it would be pretty ugly and substantial. So if that ever happened, And that's the maintenance aspect with pressure washing a painted fence and then repainting every 3 or 4 years. And I was cross-referencing materials, so we are in the historic district. And I know that that will pose a problem, so I'm hoping that maybe in our stipulations, we can say that you're maybe okay with wood fence, or if that's the route that we go. But regardless, we do need to replace our fence. So that's the objective with any motions that are made here.
Can you might have mentioned and I missed it. If you go with the vinyl material, do you have a plan for maintenance? Like what you would be using to clean that fence and how often you would do that? And
Yes, so we would do it seasonally, and I did consult with Master Halco, which is the brand for this specific material, and Brentwood Fence, our installers, and they said that if you do it often, you only need to clean with water, but we would search for a water safe and plant safe if there any soap was needed. But pressure washing with water is an acceptable method of cleaning.
Other questions?
I don't really have a question for you because I think I asked sort of similar question on the sidewalk, but I think I just share that same concern about using vinyl near a water body, but also just using that much vinyl in general. I mean, I think it is, while we are looking at something in the buffer, I think it is kind of our role to just be, good stewards of the environment and promote, whatever is most environmentally friendly. So I just would have loved to see another material, just given the quantity that you're installing here. I know there is a composite product in fencing too that's
Solid
low
cellular,
maintenance.
like AZEC.
Right, which is not 100% better, but it can be made from recycled material and stuff. So, yeah, I would definitely support wood over either of those, but just wanted to raise that again.
And it was hard for me even looking at it too, because with proper maintenance, a wood fence in ground that wet will last for 8 years, 10 years. Our post might rot out by that time. So by the time we hit the 30 years that the vinyl warranty is under, we'll have replaced a wood fence 3 times. So we've got 3 times the material, but it's a natural material over vinyl. So it is a little bit tough to decide on which is better over time with that, but what is the standard?
Do you know how long the fence that's currently installed has been?
10 years.
10 years.
And the inner portion, I believe, was done in 2015, so 8 years, 9 years.
Good questions. When you said if the HGC says you have to go with wood, and if we would make this conditional so that you could do that, what is the difference in installing the wood versus the vinyl? Because you don't have the sleeves, you don't have the metal posts, you have to use concrete.
So I would work directly with Brentwood Fence for some installation options without. We would hope that there's not concrete footings that are holding those posts in, as that can be an industry standard, but it doesn't have to be. We haven't done soil tests, so I don't know if there's clay soil there or if it's loamy. If it's clay soil, I think that it would be a little bit more or less sturdy than it is in portions. But as far as the installation method goes, it doesn't need to be in concrete, so we could add that no aggregate added or no backfill added.
So the other part of this is whether or not the soil is disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with us, but it also has to do with the other permit that you're saying you don't need, which I might have a condition on, but so that would make it a different project, really. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that we would approve it conditionally on that.
Sure.
Because it's definitely a whole different.
Yeah. And I think because of the print of the project square footage, that was the exemption. And with this project, we could apply for an exemption. However, our fence is 3 feet in front of the 25-foot buffer, so that disqualifies us from an exemption for a conditional use permit. And that is just that front line. The rest of the fence could qualify for an exemption.
And you're saying if you had to do wood?
Yeah, even if we had to do wood, it should be the exact same footprint disturbance. Each post is 0.24 square feet, a little bit less than a quarter of a square foot. So cumulatively, that's 12.5 square feet below grade for the posts.
Okay. I also, you mentioned something about plantings, maybe?
Yes.
Adding some plantings?
That at
So-
the recommendation, as a stipulation, we would be open to adding native plantings
And would this be on the inside of the fence or on the outside of the fence?
outside of the fence. Between the granite breakers and the fence, there's about a 1-foot strip right there, so they would have to be compatible with a drier area.
But also the tide comes up that high?
No.
Okay. Other comments, questions?
I understand everybody's reservations with regards to vinyl and PVC. I had the same, so I did a bit of research, and the only thing I can find is a study listed in the NIH library from 2008 that actually shows that there's no risk to marine environment, according to a European methodology that was used for this study. So I wouldn't, based on that, I would have no issue in using that material.
The vinyl?
Yeah.
Speaking to that, I also know that lobster traps are coated with vinyl, so.
Which is problematic.
That's because that degrades and breaks down into small pieces. That's another discussion.
Yeah,
But,
completely
yeah,
underwater, but as a material itself.
That's good to know.
It's the only study that I found that I could actually relate to.
Thank you.
I appreciate you looking for that.
Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion? Or any other questions or discussion?
Do you know if, when the fence was replaced 8 or 9 years ago, if you tried to do vinyl then and the HDC didn't allow it, or, because it may not?
That's a good question.
I don't have that information. I would not believe so, though.
Like, you don't think they tried to do vinyl at that
I
point?
don't think so.
Okay.
I have not pulled those historical documents, though, to look at any permitting or any questions or minutes from 2013. But
Now, that was going to be the other thought, is if you haven't pulled those records, since it's that recent, they should mostly be in electronic form, I would think. I always look back when I'm trying to go to HDC or whatever to see what they did last time.
I think we have electronic back to 2016, but we'll probably have it on paper file or hard copy
Is
file.
it a little, not quite that far back?
Yeah, we should have it. We can look into that too.
And I think you had said the last site plans we have are 2006 for our property, which was during the major renovation as
Right.
hard copies.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I had a comment on the lawn area there, and how the lawn area is still within the buffer, not the 25-foot buffer, obviously, but, and what kind of maintenance you guys do on that?
I'm sorry, which lawn area?
So that, well, anything within the 50 feet
Okay.
of the buffer. There can't be fertilizer.
No, so with bottom left portion, you can kind of see a bare birch tree. That is about the only grass, and that is just weed whacked, and it's more weeds than anything. There's no lawn or turf that's maintained there.
Okay,
And the rest is mulch and plantings.
mulching plants. So you're not using fertilizers or pesticides, anything within, just to reiterate that within the 50 feet.
No, absolutely.
It's sort of staged within 25 feet, you can't use anything, and then 25 to 50, but I don't, as long- if you're aware of that already. Okay, thanks. So, yes,
I just had a quick question because I was curious. You call them concrete or stone like breakers. What's the purpose of those large stone rectangles that were out on the beach area in front of the fence? Do you know?
So typically you'll see those at seawalls for a tide breaker or a sea breaker.
Oh,
I
okay.
really don't know why they're there or when they were ever used functionally in that area. With the age of the property, I really don't know when they got there.
Oh, okay.
and you'll be leaving those there, right?
Yeah, there's no intention to disturb anything, minus debris removal and like leaf pickup, so it can help seedlings establish better.
Okay. comments or anything? No? Any motion?
Who wants it?
Can be for discussion purposes too.
So, for discussion purposes, because I'm not entirely clear what happens if it's not vinyl and it's wood, and as Barbara said, it might need more information. I will recommend approval for the fence project at 346 Pleasant Street. And I would just add the stipulation that I would hope you'd really consider the PVC point. I mean, that's ultimately what vinyl is. I appreciate Stuart's point, but we are learning more and more in recent years how PVC is toxic and a carcinogen, and so even if it works well as a fence, lifetime of what happens to it when you have to get rid of it and dispose of it, you know, being stewards of our waterways and our watershed and our natural resources, I take to Alice's point that, you know, we're just trying to think of that more holistically and when we're advising on these projects and decisions that you're making.
And my understanding of that is when it's no longer erected, where does it go?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah. When it has to be disposed of.
Gotcha.
It's going to be around for hundreds of years. So, and what does that mean for the environment?
Any stipulations or anything? Just- oh,
I would add also, just as a stipulation, that we add the boundary markers. I think for this particular property, there's probably locations that make sense at the corners of the fence and even potentially along the fence line. You know, there's likely not, given the nature of the landscaping inside the fence, you know, it doesn't seem like there's much worry about that. You guys kind of have that under control, but you know, even facing outward, I know people do, you know, walk along that shore from time to time, so any reminder we can give them that that's a sensitive area would be good.
Where do you recommend the placements of those? Along like the 20-foot buffer, 100-foot buffer?
I mean, typically we say along the 25-foot buffer or the no-cut zone. In this case, it's kind of a, you know, you don't really do maintenance outside the fence other than, like you
Beach
said,
cleanup.
collecting
Yeah.
debris or whatever. So I would say certainly at the points that people might possibly kind of access that area, so the corners of the fence where the roads are, if somebody were to walk down the road and kind of get into that area, and then potentially kind of spaced a couple points along the fence, even facing towards the pond. Potentially on the fence facing in would be, you know, more just if the landscape plan were to change in the future, you know, you'd want to remind people that this is a sensitive area, so.
Would you be open to us having our own made as opposed to using orange markers? Does that matter specifically? Okay.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, I think maybe just as long as there's language that it's.
Environmentally sensitive?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that's one condition. I was wondering if I could add another condition before it's seconded, or suggest another condition, is to include a detailed maintenance plan to be on site and for the fence as far as the cleaning, and to be using water only, especially along that area right on the buffer area. So I don't know if that, because you had brought that up. So.
Yeah. I fully support that. Thank you for reminding me.
Does that hold to the same if we go with a painted wood fence, though?
How, you have to paint it, right? That's your big thing. You don't.
Right, but also like you have to use algae removers so that paint adheres, because with latex paint we have a little bit less adhesion properties. So then we would likely have to use some sort of algicide.
Yeah, I'm thinking more for the vinyl, if that's what
Okay.
you're, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, anybody want a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Discussion.
Well, I need some clarification. So if the HDC is not okay, then as you mentioned, Barbara, this seems like it's a lot more intensive on all accounts, placement and maintenance. And so if we are to vote on what we proposed, that's purely for this vinyl option. If they have to go a different way, what does that mean? What does that look like? How does that work?
It looks like the existing fence, where it's maintenance and degradation over time. So
But I
that's
mean,
the
in
problem.
relation to us, do you have to come back before us? Are there
Process-wise.
stipulations, process-wise for you and for us just to understand?
I don't understand that either.
Kate might.
Yeah.
Maybe. So, for process-wise, if HDC requires wood, that would be a change in the wetland conditional use plan, so they wouldn't necessarily come back before us, but would go to planning board. But we could here, if we want to make stipulations for if they do have to go back to planning board and they skip us, if HDC requires wood, we'd like so-and-so and so that you sort of have stipulations on both
Makes sense.
ends. Might be the way to get around that, since we won't be able to see it again if we approve of it.
And if there's any changes to like the square footage impact below grade or on top of the grade, I would absolutely bear that in mind and continue to make sure that we're still in compliance with any exceptions or involving an HDES if necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to make the recommendation anyway, because you would have to go to DES
Yeah.
too. But I know you had gone online and looked it up as far as whether or not you needed a permit, but I
Yes, and I-
strongly recommend you call them, because it's not just, according to what I've heard, is you may need a wetlands permit. I know it's shoreland, but I would call and ask somebody in addition to looking at the website.
I did make a phone call and then they have an interactive tool, but I could definitely try to get something in an email.
Yeah, just in case. Like, it's not a condition, but
Yeah.
you can't really
No,
say
they
that.
referred me to the website to double check. Like, okay.
Right, yeah. So, did that help at all?
It does. I just don't know if anyone is inclined to want to add any further stipulations, or if we need to amend my motion to take that into account. I don't know how
So
the
the-
other commissioners
The
feel.
question then, based on what Kate said, right, is if we want to add a stipulation that if HDC requires wood, we recommend these things. The question is whether or not we want to add that stipulation, I think, right?
Yes.
They would come back to us?
They wouldn't, is what Kate said.
I think they should come back to us.
We can request that, too, I think.
Just because they have to get a DES one too at that point.
Seems like it should come back if they recommend that. There's probably too many things to put in a stipulation that require discussion, I would think.
Yeah, and I would recommend plantings and things like that, because I don't want to recommend that now, because then they'd have to get,
Right.
they're disturbing the soil, so.
Right.
But I don't know, does other people
You'd
want?
recommend plantings if wood was required?
Yeah, just because then they're in there digging anyway, but.
I mean, it
We
might be
would
helpful.
hope to still use a no dig installation because with wood, we would just be going directly in the same post hole and then tamping down the soil around it.
Right, but if that all doesn't work out. Yeah.
Oh, if there's a change in processed installation, absolutely. But we're really trying to not disturb anything than what is already disturbed by the post holes.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
I mean, it might be helpful to spell that out, that route. If you are required to do wood for Historic District Commission, what would we add to that as stipulations?
Or rather than have them come back?
I mean, then it's kind of like laid out now in terms of the HDC could also weigh that in when they're considering it.
Yeah, they haven't gone to HTC yet, so we can make sure that's in their packet.
Want to do?
If we went with wood in a direct replacement, we wouldn't need HDC approval for it
Oh,
because
okay.
so I'm making it hard by trying to change the material, but it's really in an effort to like be more conscious of what we're spending so much on over time, what the maintenance is over time, what the blasting paint chips and painting is over time. So at this point in time, I really do think that PVC is the most environmentally appropriate material. But reflecting in 50 years, that could change. But as of now, that is my perspective.
I'm actually sympathetic to that position, I have to say. I mean, just as somebody who's worked in wetlands and installed a lot of PVC pipes in order to do water table monitoring and that kind of thing. I mean, PVC is used very widely in wetland environments, and as pipes for homes and that kind of thing. So I understand that there's like
Pros and
a reason
cons.
why you're picking it, and it's not just about, cost.
I think we also have to consider, hopefully we're doing this once for 25 years instead of 3 times.
Yeah.
And if you consider the environmental impacts of doing it 3 times and repainting it probably 5 times or 6 times, those all add up compared to doing it once with vinyl,
Totally.
which I admit is not a nice material, but for this usage seems to be the better compromise.
And the hope for the future is that there'll be better options for recycling at that point too.
Right. And the paint chips are real, like those just hang out in the soil forever. And,
So how are we going on this?
Do we want to put in a stipulation saying if the applicant has to change material for this application, they should come back before for a
Basically,
new wetland conditional use permit?
I think that's what I heard.
You guys want to do that too?
Is that the easiest way, or
I don't know.
would you rather give HTC direct recommendations?
Are there any significant changes we would have as a board recommendations if they were to install fence, wood fence? I mean, I think that we had kind of, in that, one of those stipulations said the maintenance plan for vinyl. I think we would want to see a maintenance plan for a wood fence. Obviously, that would include cleaning of paint chips and painting, on a regular basis, but so maybe the maintenance plan would be applicable either way. But other than that, from a wood fence perspective, are there any real conditions that we would want to recommend other than maintenance? My only concern would be if there is concrete in every one of those holes, and I think at that point, maybe it's a substantial change from what's presented, and maybe that does need to come back and understand that. But if they're just pulling rotted posts out of holes and putting a new post in that hole, it's, not a lot of disturbance, not a lot of change. So, I don't have anything else I would add to a wood fence, basically, so.
And I believe that if we wind up doing any sort of excavation or needing to add aggregate, that would bring us back here completely. But in a apples to apples, no dig installation with 2 different materials, that's straightforward in terms of impact to the soil and disturbance. So if we change the install method, I would reapply.
Okay, so we make it that kind of condition, just if they change the
Yeah.
Yeah.
the infill?
That's reasonable.
And otherwise, add in that condition, otherwise they need to do the maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, I
as you
think
described.
we've already put conditionally that a maintenance plan is required. I think we
Yeah.
had said something about like maintenance plan required for vinyl fence, but just maintenance
Just
plan
vinyl.
required, period.
Yeah, sounds good.
No matter what the fence is.
You good, Kate?
I think so.
Everybody good?
So, to be totally clear, what we're voting on, I mean, I heard the stipulations, but we're basically voting on a vinyl fence. And that's it. It's not, maybe it'll be wood, maybe it'll be vinyl. We're just voting on passing a vinyl fence or not.
We're voting on the fence or the plan as presented with
Right.
the stipulations, yeah, with the
If it is
stipulations that
wood.
we've.
Then they could, okay.
They
got
don't
it.
have to come.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's tough, where if we were in any different area, we wouldn't have to go through the Historic District Commission.
Right.
So that would be where it ends, and that's the only thing that would send us back to wood to replace in-kind directly.
But if they have to disturb it, change the infill. then-
And if there's
Do
any
see
change to scope, it triggers a new application
again.
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything other than a no-dig installation of an existing,
Right.
replacing of the existing fence would.
Good wording.
Yeah.
Good luck, Kate.
Just, I think.
Do we want to discuss any more or do a vote? I mean, we have a vote. No, we have a,
No,
yeah. Motion. You want to do a vote?
Need a second?
All those in favor?
Did we get a second?
Did we get a second?
Lynn.
Yeah, yeah.
Lynn,
Okay.
second. Yeah.
I didn't opposed? Okay. You got it.
Well, I'll be curious to see, and Kate, I'll keep you posted too, either way, just so that the information's out there and what happens.
Isaac too, so stay updated. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do we need to make a motion to postpone for the next meeting for the high school?
I think so.
Seems like it.
Anybody
Does there
want-
need to be a presenter to?
Oh, yeah.
um,
Oh, right, I'm sorry, yeah, we
Okay.
ran into this with the yes project that I wasn't here for. Yeah, so technically, we've had time to review the project, so if you want to make a decision and you feel comfortable voting without the presentation, that's completely fine too.
I'm sorry, I have to retire from this meeting.
Before you go there, Stuart, you brought up for this particular application, the batting cage or something, the batting area?
Yes.
The goalpost, to be in
Yeah.
front of the goalpost, right?
Yeah,
in
the
front of the
batting
goalpost?
cage would not go
No further
back. No further back than the current goalposts.
I remember it.
So is that what's
Yeah,
indicated in the
that-
plan?
There was an oral agreement that would be
So
the
we need
case.
to put
wanna
that as a
add that as
condition?
a
Stipulation. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
See ya.
So what do we want to do? We want to go with it?
So, I mean, I guess if anybody has questions they would want to ask of, what was his name? Sorry.
Ken Lynchy. yeah.
Ken, that were not answered on the site walk, we probably would want to postpone. Otherwise, we could go ahead and vote on it, make the motion and vote. I don't have any additional questions other than what was
Yeah.
answered on the.
I don't have any additional questions either.
Anybody?
I would say that since I didn't make the sidewalk, I mean, I'm confident in what my fellow commissioners would decide, but I would probably abstain just because I wasn't at the sidewalk. I have reviewed it, but just haven't really engaged much with anybody to.
Any questions are coming?
Just one question. I mean, I feel like we did the site walk. That's probably almost better than coming here, honestly, like in terms of getting a real feel for the project, which is great. I mean, what's submitted on paper is very light. So I guess I just wanted to just confirm that there isn't anything glaringly missing. I mean, there's very little ground disturbance, but there's a little bit. In terms of ripping up the grass and putting down the kind of the sandy mixture, I'm comfortable with approving it without them being here, but I guess I just wanted to just double check that there wasn't anything super important missing from this packet.
Yeah, I'll just speak to that. There definitely were some pieces missing that were requested of the applicant. And it was sort of promised that they'd get those in before we sent the packet around. And that didn't happen. And then they were supposed to send around some more materials last week that we weren't able to get. So it is missing some information, but the site walk did provide some information just based on what the impacts would be, not necessarily exact numbers, but I can kind of describe just the square footage of impacts would be for the posts, for the backstop, for the batting cage, just fencing around it, so that might not be too much of an impact, but and then the removal of all the sod would be replaced with that silt clay sand mix that the applicant stated in the field that it was permeable, so to an extent, I guess. So that sort of semi-answered a question that someone had.
What was the most, in your opinion, consequential item that was missing that was requested?
We just, so for filling in the application, we were missing the exact square footage of impacts for the batting cage, for the backstop fence, just because we didn't have the post size numbers in the area.
Does it, I think we should think about if there were multiple items missing that are normally provided, if we let this move forward, does it give an appearance that we're biased for these kind of projects when we require that for every other? I think it might.
Yeah, I guess my concern on this property in particular too is that, and with the information that we have, that we were kind of making reference to things that were on site already, but not really in any measured drawing. Like, please don't go any further than this item And that does tend to happen on this property when things change. And so I don't know if it's something that we can ask that there be, either be a measured drawing or that, someone mark where the existing tree line and existing mow line is, that it not further encroach, because that does seem to take place here, especially with new projects. So I don't know, I would have brought that if someone had come today too, I think.
It seems pretty straightforward, and most of us didn't have other questions, but again, I would be concerned that if it's missing pieces that are normally provided, that, we set a precedent that we shouldn't set. So I would advocate that we do postpone it at this point.
Okay. Any other comments? Somebody want to make a motion?
And try. I think this is the first one I've done. I make a motion that we postpone 50 Andrew Jarvis Drive
Second?
To the next meeting?
to the next meeting, yes.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, any more discussion? So can you let him know what additional materials we agreed, and about the goalposts being indicated?
Yep, and we'll talk about tree line, indicating where the current mow line is, whatever I'll have to go back and watch the video, but yes, yeah. We'll see
Some
what
like
we
measurements on the drawing, right, is what you wanted to see, like from the road.
get more
or
exact
something.
drawing of
Right, yeah.
and
I would say also just, if we're discussing with him again, or you're conversing with him again, any, additional no-mow area would be beneficial and potentially help offset some of the
Yes.
activity that they're doing. So even if they could pull that mow line back even a few feet, every bit helps around that field, so.
that's a good idea, because I know
Really
in
good
the field, I might have asked if he was they were planning for any plantings, and I think the answer was no, so.
Sure. But even if they just
Right,
pull the
so
no-mow line back and
that'd be
kind of
great.
provide some of that offset for impact, yep.
Great. Okay. Good
Barb,
idea.
do we need Tyler to vote?
Yep.
And I think we do, yeah.
Yeah. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? And one abstention, or for?
Well,
Now,
for postponing,
yeah,
yeah.
I can, I vote to postpone it as well to get more information.
Okay, great. So the motion passes. Very good. And then we have other business. I know we have, Talia, you want to give an update about what's going on?
Sure.
You and maybe Lynn, if any.
Yeah, so I guess this is kind of came from originally talking to Barbara about this, but we had met many months ago to discuss how oftentimes when properties exchange hands, people don't understand what's going on as far as wetland buffer and general care for their home that might be experiencing flooding or just general water infiltrating the property because it rains. So we are organizing, Lynn, myself, and then a number of other people from DES and the Great Bay Estuary, and then someone that's also in insurance. We're organizing a class for realtors where it's going to be at Strawberry Bank sometime this winter, and they'll be able to take this course and have a better understanding of what's going on near wetland buffers, but then also generally with home ownership in the general Seacoast area. So hopefully we'll be able to give people some insights as to why development right along our waterways might not be a great idea, and also give them insights to why wetland protection is important and also beneficial to homeowners, not just like this negative thing that is potentially prohibiting people from putting in the amenities that they want. And I think we're going to be discussing some potential changes at the state level with rules and regulations for disclosure for realtors. So like one of those is when you currently buy a house in the state of New Hampshire, there are some disclosures that are missing from the property disclosure that the homeowner fills out, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people's opinion. So, like, it's missing, was there ever a flood here? That's like not a question that a homeowner has to fill out. So some things like that may be changing, and we're gonna discuss that as well. But yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to say that's awesome. And as a person who bought a house in the wetland buffer 15 years ago, not knowing it, like, I think having a disclosure where people are made aware of that ahead of time, because I think probably one of our applicants is a perfect example today. He probably had no idea that they were in a wetland buffer and needed to come before us, and what the requirements were in building. And so if there's a way to kind of educate and inform and head some of that stuff off at the pass, that would be amazing. So thank you. Thank you for taking on that initiative, all of you. That's awesome.
For sure.
It's been interesting too to like hear this discussion around disclosure around, you know, that home purchase moment, and people have all different solutions for how to address that problem. And one of them, Kate, I'm actually curious about your take on this, is to add, you know, the presence of a wetland or presence of a wetland buffer on a property onto the tax card, you know, so that, which is often consulted, I think,
Yeah,
at that,
definitely.
at that moment, right? Because you can look at the building permits, but also see, oh, they pulled a wetland permit, or they're actually in a buffer.
It's even something that people sign often, like.
Yeah,
have
that
to
you saw.
sign.
Yep,
Yeah,
I
that you
did.
saw.
Yeah.
You have to sign a tax card that
You don't have to, but many people, I'd say 70% of transactions, I would see, like, buyers signing the tax card, like in the packet of information. So it's like covering some more bases than not.
An interesting idea. I'll have to ask
Yes.
the assessors and see what they think. I wonder if that's legal to sort of tweak that or add in.
Those tax card pieces, yeah. I mean, it takes a little bit of the pressure off the realtors and puts it on the municipalities at that point, but, I mean, I think it's probably multiple approaches are gonna be needed, like, we educate realtors, we educate homeowners, and we have better information in multiple places. Yeah. And I'll add maybe just one other little thing to this project. It's been really fun. Yeah, so we're aiming to do the first sort of pilot course in November at Strawberry Bank, which is great, but then we're gonna do sort of a dry run in September. And, you know, if anybody has an interest in this, they'd be welcome to come and be part of our kind of test audience. It would be kind of fun and could offer some feedback. And it's a nice, we'd still have a couple months too to incorporate some feedback at that moment if anybody wants to participate in that. Or if you have realtor friends, it's actually could be kind of fun to get a couple more realtors in the audience, because it's just one more way to kind of really tap their brains and get them invested in this topic too, as a, you know, giving us feedback.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah.
And they did do this in Maine too, and it was really, really successful. So as far as attendance, right?
Yeah, really successful. I think it was just up a little bit too far for many of the people that practice, like, right in our little bubble, Portsmouth Cary. So, yeah.
And Talia's been super generous with her time, helping us get like certified as instructors so that realtors who participate get professional sort of credit for it. It's like a whole
It's
process.
definitely how
that-
you get people to participate, is you offer them credit.
Yeah, you guys have jumped through a lot of hoops to do this. It's like, it's good. Thanks.
I think it will really it'll be, even if we're getting a number of people certified to teach the course, so I think hopefully once it's in place, it will be able to live for a long time, and we can even add instructors over time. But once it's in place, a lot of the heavy lifting will be done. So I'm excited for it to be around for a while. Yeah.
Thanks, you guys. So any other, you aren't going to speak to that DES thing? Comments? The additional materials in the packet that,
Oh,
but you don't have
I
to.
can't. I haven't actually looked at it in a while. I know. So usually our packet includes DES correspondence that's just come in over the last month. Usually there's not that many, so it's not, you know, exciting to talk about. But the last month and a half has included, or I've accumulated a lot of different letters from DES, which I'm sure you noticed, and they're all in the back of the packet. But I don't know if anybody had questions about them. It's usually just anytime a permit is filed in the town, we get a letter, or if something is going through DES that isn't necessarily coming to us, we get notified. Things like that. Or if an appeal is going on for a permit, we get notified of that too.
Or we make recommendations and they respond sometimes.
Yeah.
Any other business? Okay, motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn?
Back to that.
All those in favor? Okay, thanks. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.